What's up, yardies? Welcome to the Backyard Variety Tour. As always, I'm your host, Ian Pozz. Today we're going to get into extraordinary mob flicks. Okay, so here's some typical mob movies we're not going to talk about because they've been talked about to death. So you got Casino, Goodfellas, Godfather 1, 2, and, well, not 3. Although I did watch the Opus, or whatever it's called, when 3 kind of came out again recently. And it was like redone, and it was the way he wanted it, and it was supposed to be, and it was like, yeah, okay, like 3's not bad, it's just not up to the scale, and it's just like a little weird. I don't know why. There's like an underlying creepiness or weirdness in it, probably with the two cousins kind of dating or whatever, gonna marry each other, whatever it is. That's probably the weird thing, but it just wasn't up to par with the other Godfather movies. Then you got Donnie Brasco, Married to the Mob, Witness to the Mob, Gotti, the old one, and then you got Gotti, the new one. The new one stinks with Travolta. It's so bad. And you got Getting Gotti from back in the day. You got American Gangster, King of New York, New Jack City, Miller's Crossing, The Untouchables, Carlito's Way, Scarface, Mean Streets, The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, A Bronx Tale, The Departed, A French Connection, The French Connection, I mean. Public Enemies, Leon the Professional, Pulp Fiction, On the Waterfront, Get Shorty, Snatch, Sexy Beast, Leaving Las Vegas has a tinge of mob. I like seeing the mobsters kind of run around every 15-20 minutes. They show a scene of the mobsters chasing. So it's not really a mob movie. It's about Nicolas Cage being super drunk. But anyways, those are the mob movies that we're not going to talk about today. So too bad.
Hey, come on, Johnny, let's go.
Extraordinary mob flicks. Fuck you. Okay, so a couple of general house cleaning notes. House cleaning or housekeeping? I don't know. General house cleaning. A couple general housekeeping notes. What's going on? Oh yeah, so I was thinking that, because bars, here's one thing that sucks for single guys. I used to go to a bar and sit at a bar and have all sorts of interactions, even if you just went to the bar solo. Those were great times. Now it's going to be a long time before I think we're allowed back in a bar again, kind of thing. It's going to be all patios or whatever. So that's why I invested in a flask, because this could be the summer of park drinking or the summer of exterior drinking. I already had a couple flasks. I just couldn't find them. I think I do need to find them though and dig them out, because I bought a 12-inch, well, no, not a 12-inch flask, a 12-ounce flask, and it's just a bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. I wanted something bigger than the usual, 8, I think it is, which is about there, but yeah, 12 might be too much. If there was a 10, I'd recommend a 10 for sure, because that'll still fit. This barely just fits in your pocket, and you got to have pretty deep pockets, and it just fits. An 8 fits for sure, but a 10 I think would be perfect. And so this is just off Amazon for like $19-20. Came in 2 days, whatever. It's perfect, because I think there's going to be a lot of outside drinking this year. Because who wants to just go? Sure, patios are great and all, but I did like going and just sitting at a bar, interacting with the bartender, people who come in and out, whatever, anything, or no one, just sitting there chilling, having some drinks, enjoying the atmosphere. But I do think it's going to be park and exterior drinking, so always good to invest in a flask, especially this summer. As you can see behind me here, my bar cart. It's not a real bar cart. I do want to get a bar cart. I've been looking at a couple on Amazon. I have one waiting for me back at home at my parents' place that I actually want to get here somehow. And if that doesn't happen within the next year or so, I'll be getting an official bar cart. But as you can see, this one here, it's dwindling. It's over the pandemic, whatever it's been, 15 months or whatever. If you look at past episodes, that baby used to be pretty full and slow and steady. Sure enough, it's not like I was hammering it. I wasn't hammering it, but slow and steady. I was enjoying it, and it's dwindling. I'm actually down to my least favorable whiskey right now. And to give you a hint of what that is, I'm actually going up to the Blue Mountains area at some point soon too. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But so that's the update on the booze. And on a different booze level, the beer level, I'm out of focus here. There we go. On a different booze level, the beer level, Broken Stick's going to have my favorite beer. I believe it was one of the very first ones I tried from there. Farm and Forage series. There's a couple different series of Farm and Forage. I forget which one it is, but this one has spruce tips in it, and it just tastes like Christmas. That's what I thought. It's just got that very spirited, I don't know, there's some sort of tang or something to it. It was just great. So that's coming out in a week at Broken Stick, because it's been since last year. That was the first beer I tried, so almost a year ago since I had it. And that was my favorite one. So can't wait for that. So it's Canada Day weekend. I don't even know, can you say Canada Day anymore? Are we allowed to say Canada? Does Canada still exist as a country? I don't know. What are we talking about anymore? I don't know. Anyways, so I hope everyone enjoys. Hope everyone has a good Canada Day. Without further ado. Oh, it stinks. It stinks. It stinks. It stinks. But enough blither blathering. Oh, I'm out of focus again. I'm always out of focus here. But enough blither blathering. Out of focus again. Just give me the light. That's my just give me the light.
Just give me the light and pass the joe. What's another buckle of more?
But enough blither blathering by me. Let's get into today's episode. So we're talking about extraordinary mob flicks. But before we get into that, let's get into the half-ass jokes. Half-ass jokes. Man, I sure do wish I invested in soapboxes during the pandemic. Let's get into today's episode, Extraordinary Mob Flicks. First up, we got a movie called Mikey and Nikki, 1976. Nicky is on the run from the mob, and he turns to his old pal Mikey for help. So you got John Cassavetes, one of the greatest indie king directors of all time, who used to take all the money he made as a top-notch Hollywood actor and put it into his own movies that typical studios wouldn't make. And you got Peter Falk, another great one. And they were best friends in real life, and they play best friends in this movie. They've done a ton of movies together, and they're good, just like Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau, something like that, except they were the 70s version. You also have the great Ned Beatty, who unfortunately just passed away, as a supporting role as a hitman in this movie. The great Ned Beatty, so many movies. Nashville comes to mind. He's just a great supporting character, Ned Beatty. He's in tons of stuff. Oh, I just watched a movie. He's in Rampart. I just saw him in Rampart the other day as well. So Ned Beatty, great actor. Mikey and Nikki is written by Elaine May. So it's a mob movie written by a woman. Kind of interesting. And it's basically about John Cassavetes' character being very paranoid and his relationship with his best friend. And it's kind of like they kind of revert to being kids. It's a little bit of a childhood thing. They used to be best friends growing up in New York. They don't show that stuff, but through the way that they act as adults, you can kind of see their dynamic as friendships as kids too. So it's got a childhood playfulness to it. They go wandering around in a cemetery at one point, but it's very paranoid as well, because one of them thinks he's going to get killed, and he thinks it's going to be his best friend who does it, which it usually is. And they're right there in front of each other the whole time for 2 hours. And it's a good example of showing paranoia and what being at the end of your rope is kind of like, as one of the characters is. So that's Mikey and Nikki. Mikey and Nikki. Next up, we got Family Enforcer, aka The Death Collector. And now you can watch this on YouTube. It's about an hour and a half long. It's super old school from the 70s, 1976. Neighborhood kid goes to work for the mafia as a debt collector. So pretty simple. It's an early role for Joe Pesci, and you can tell if you watch it that if you know Sopranos took a lot of inspiration and ideas from this movie. It also takes place in New Jersey, this movie, so that's also why. Little known fact is Scorsese cast Joe Pesci and Frank Vincent in Raging Bull after seeing them in The Death Collector. And it's a movie that's much funnier than I expect it to be. I think that's where Sopranos kind of took a lot of its inspiration in keeping it humorous, keeping the mob stuff humorous, which is cool to see in this. And it's probably the lowest professionally budget movie I've ever seen, to an extent that was like a quality film. It's blurry and grainy as can be. It's got low production value, but somehow they pull it off. And it's if you let that stuff slide and you just kind of watch the movie and watch the characters and take it all in, and if you love mob movies, you're going to like this movie. That's Family Enforcer, aka The Death Collector, and that's available on YouTube. Next up is Road to Perdition. So Road to Perdition is a mob enforcer's son witnesses a murder, forcing him and his father to take to the road and his father down a path of redemption and revenge. And it's from 2002. This is the last film of cinematographer Conrad Hall, who actually won the Oscar for this movie. He also did other movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Cool Hand Luke, Marathon Man, which is very cool. Check out Marathon Man if you can. Great Dustin Hoffman movie. And Conrad Hall also did American Beauty. So this guy is like one of the most famous cinematographers ever. One of the most talented too. And it was also the last live action film for Paul Newman, who kind of worked hand in hand with Conrad Hall all those years. Butch Cassidy, Cool Hand Luke, This Road to Perdition. So they've worked together for like 30 something years on multiple projects. And it was the last film for both of them. They both died not long after. So this was the last live action movie. I think Paul Newman might have did Cars, a couple animated voices things after, but this is it for those talented guys. It's a film of few words, and that's because it's beautifully shot. And the music is also great. Thomas Newman does a great job with the score. And you have a supporting role of Jude Law, who plays kind of like a squirrely hitman. And it's kind of cool to see another, Prohibition style. It must have been out of Chicago? That's one thing I actually can't remember. Boston or Chicago, it must have been the starting point where this movie kind of takes place. But it leaves a lasting impression. It's kind of got a different ending, a little bit darker ending. Next is Eastern Promises and History of Violence, kind of packaging them together. So Eastern Promises, a teenager who dies during childbirth leaves clues in her journal that could tie her child to a rape involving a Russian mob family. And then you got History of Violence as a mild-mannered man becomes a local hero through an act of violence, which sets off repercussions that will shake his family to its very core. So they're both directed by Canadian director David Cronenberg, one of the most talented to ever come out of Canada. And they're both very hardcore movies. One's History of Violence has that, I think people look back on that rape scene or half rape scene with his wife or something. That got a lot of controversy. And then Eastern Promises is just hardcore, especially with the twists and turns. And, it deals with Russian gangsters, so it's even a bit crazier, the stuff that they do. And Cronenberg just shows it in a way that kind of is like interesting to watch, but still instills this like shock in you. Super dark and disturbing, but super entertaining, and has a lot of famous Eastern Promises has a famous knife fight scene. Now I know a lot of people talk about that because Vigo's naked and he's fighting a guy in a sauna or whatever. That's a very popular scene that people remember. It's well choreographed, and it's just like a weird location, and really a character couldn't be more vulnerable than being naked. That actually brings me back to The Death Collector. Someone gets killed when they're in the bathroom. Guy's like lifting his shirt over his head at one point, and the guy comes in and shoots him while the shirt's like right here. So the guy's face isn't even, and then it's a white shirt and it's just blood on the thing after. So the guy gets shot while he's taking his shirt over his head. Very vulnerable position in the bathroom. Or if you see in mob movies, guys are always, or real life, because it's the best way to kill someone in real life is when they're getting in or out of a car, because it's a very vulnerable position. You're like sliding out of this thing. You're not really looking around you at that time. So that's why people are always getting killed getting in or out of cars in mob movies, because you're very vulnerable. Anyways, back to the Eastern Promises, History of Violence. I think they both kind of have twists and turns. Eastern Promises with some much bigger twist and turn bombs that come up. The kind of difference between them is that Eastern Promises is kind of your traditional mob movie that follows like within the interior life of the mob. And then History of Violence is kind of like a guy who tried to go straight and runs a diner, and this is the mob kind of coming back, catching up with him kind of thing. He was kind of living a clean life, so it's kind of a different aspect. It's almost like if Goodfellas, right at the end when Ray Liotta's at the end of Goodfellas in his robe picking up the paper, it's almost like if History of Violence took over from there. The guy has left mob life, reacclimated himself into society, and the movie kind of takes off from there. So, and then all hell kind of breaks loose. So very cool, two very cool movies. And that's Eastern Promises, 2007, and History of Violence, 2005. One of the most kind of different ones on the list, one of my favorites on here, is Killing Them Softly from 2012. And this is Jackie Coogan. Jackie Coogan or Jackie Cogan? Jackie Cogan is an enforcer hired to restore order after 3 dumb guys rob a mob-protected card game, causing the local criminal economy to collapse. So 3 dummies rob a card game, and the criminal economy collapses because no one wants to go play cards, no one wants to gamble money, everyone's afraid of getting robbed, no one's making money. So it's kind of an interesting take, this small little thing and this small little moment of time to focus on, rather than this like anthology like Goodfellas or Sopranos or Casino, rather than an anthology kind of take, focuses on this very small incident and expands it, which is kind of interesting. So it's directed, Killing Them Softly is directed by the great Andrew Dominik. I really like this director. He hasn't been given too many shots at making movies, but when he does, I think he's made 3 or 4 now. They're just incredible. So this is Andrew Dominik. He also did Chopper. He also did The Assassination of Jesse James. And he also did a few episodes of Mindhunter. And the ones that I watched, his episodes were always the most well done, or the best of the bunch, if it wasn't Fincher himself. Did Fincher himself just direct the pilot, maybe? But anyways, Andrew Dominik, his episodes of Mindhunter were always the best. So like I said, this is kind of like a low-key mob flick. It's designed kind of behind-the-scenes style, showing you what happens behind the scenes, the conversations that happen. Brad Pitt is constantly meeting with that great supporting actor. His name is escaping me right now, the bald guy with the glasses. Richard something. I'll have to pull it up. But he was also in The Shape of Water. He was like the neighbor next door in The Shape of Water. Anyways, great actor. And he's good in this. He plays this good lawyer, I think, for the mob, or almost consigliere. Doesn't sound like he's like in the mob, but if you listen to how they talk, they never drop names. Very interesting to hear the low-key in way they talk, like they think this or they want that, or they would never be happy with that decision, blah, blah, blah. So the way they talk is, it'd be harder for someone who wasn't really paying attention to keep up, because it's not going to be a lot of flash and pizzazz. You got to listen to what they're saying to understand what's going on, because they kind of talk in code the whole movie. So it's not so much action as it is setup, but it's an interesting dynamic to filmmaking. You know, the way the bullets, there's a couple shootout scenes, the way the bullets are slowed down and the glass shatters and points of view change. That's interesting stuff I've never seen before. It brings a kind of a new look to it. And it's got a great ending by Brad Pitt, and great song to kind of cap it off too. Great speech. You got the political campaign in the background, so there's a little bit of politics and stuff in the background. The city that they're in is supposed to be like Anywhere USA or Anytown USA, but it kind of feels like New Orleans or something like that. Feels like a dangerous place. Cameos. Ton of people are in this. So you got a cameo from Johnny Sack in The Sopranos. I think he plays a guy called Squirrel in this. And then Benny from The Sopranos, he's got a cameo as like a mobster thug. And you've also got Ray Liotta, who plays the guy whose card game gets robbed. And speaking of that, it's actually got one of the best scenes ever. It's actually probably the best. There's maybe 3 I can think of altogether. One is Heat, for like an armed robbery scene at a bank. This is with machine guns, Heat, but just like how well it's executed by the characters within the movie, but then also executed by the team filming it and all that. Just everything goes into it. Heat is one of the best, but then this is probably the most intense card game robbery I've ever seen. Just the way they pull it off and do it is the best I've ever seen. Next to that, the most realistic I've ever seen is The Friends of Eddie Coyle, but this is definitely the most intense. So that's Killing Them Softly. Next, we got The Long Good Friday. So this is a British UK movie from 1980. It's an up-and-coming gangster is tested by the insurgents of an unknown, very powerful threat. Breakthrough performance for Bob Hoskins, who played Smee in the Hook movie. And such a powerful, forward, momentum-pushing performance. Like, he's just a powerhouse in this movie. He's just this short. He's like an evil George Costanza. So he's just like a steamroller. He's like a fridge that just pushes forward, unstoppable force. And it's also a very ticking time bomb of a movie. It's got that impending doom intensity to it. You've also got a Pierce Brosnan cameo in his theatrical debut. And it also has one of those long, great shots at the end of movies that just holds on the character's face. Most times it's at the end of the movies, but I'll bring up an example that's not. That holds on the character's face, and the character's just kind of staring straight ahead while they sit in a car, or they're like looking out the window or something. Most times it's straight ahead. And a couple examples of that are in Michael Clayton, when George Clooney gets in the car at the end. He's just kind of sitting there and it holds on him for about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Or that scene in Boogie Nights is one that's not at the end of the movie, close to the end of the movie, the denouement, as they say, denouement. But where Marky Mark's sitting there at Alfred Molina's house and they're throwing firecrackers, and it just keeps zooming in on his face, and he just kind of he zones out. But by zoning out so much, he kind of realizes he zones in, and he realizes how much of a big piece of shit he's become, and how dangerous what he's doing. He's like, we got to get out of here. We got to go, man. And then the shit goes down. So that's a great one that holds on him for like a minute and a half. Just zooms in on him the whole time. So after this movie, The Long Good Friday, Bob Hoskins, Smee, didn't appear in a movie for a whole year after this. And now probably for a couple of reasons. I think one could be either that he was doing theater at the time, because maybe he got, a lot of acclaim and paychecks and money from this movie, and he was able to take time off and do his passion of theater, because theater doesn't pay that much. That's option one. Or he was just getting a bunch of crappy roles and he didn't want to be amazing in this movie and then kind of pull the Cuba Gooding Jr. effect where like you're amazing, you win the Oscar, but then you go do Snow Dogs and all these crappy movies afterwards. So he probably waited a year until the next movie that came along that was like worthy of him tackling, kind of thing. So there is a very strategic element in the success of your career as well, which is interesting. He didn't want to just take any part. And I'm sure once you're usually successful at one part, I'm sure all the parts that he was getting offered were just to be more gangsters. And that's probably not what he wanted after just going through probably a year or 2 years of that, between the preparation, the filming, and then the P&A afterwards, or P&R, whatever. And it's a Criterion movie. So that's The Long Good Friday. Another extraordinary mob movie to check out is Find Me Guilty. I'm not going to dive into it here. You can revert back to an old episode here. Here. And because I covered it in Courtroom Dramas, my courtroom movie reviews a while back. And basically, so Find Me Guilty, 2006, in the late 1980s, a low-level gangster named Jackie DiNorcio defends himself in court in what became the longest criminal trial in American judicial history. Coming up next, we got The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. After his last crime has him looking at a long prison sentence for repeat offenses, a low-level Boston gangster decides to snitch on his friends to avoid jail time. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, we've talked about this a number of times on the show. It's one of my favorites. It's one of the most realistic crime movies I've seen. Just love it to death. It's nothing too crazy. So you got a young Peter Boyle in it, and he played the father, and Everybody Loves Raymond. Great actor. And he was also in Taxi Driver as well. So young Peter Boyle's in it. And you got an old Robert Mitchum in a role where he's kind of wearing this members only jacket the whole time. I love that line from Sopranos. He's like, where'd you get that jacket? And then he's like, members only? What, have you been wearing that since the 80s? And that's the kind of guy he is. He's kind of this blue collar, down on his luck, not rich Boston gangster. And this movie has a lot of snitches. It focuses on the snitch or the rats. And this was back in the 70s before it kind of became a big thing in the 90s. And as mentioned, this has one of the most realistic bank robberies I've ever seen on film. Check it out if not, just for that. There's one that happens at the very beginning. Great character, great actor, Alex Rocco. I like seeing movies that he's in. And he played Mo Green in The Godfather. So he's got a great voice, that guy. And he's just a good actor. And he plays a good role in here that you see a bit more expanded than Mo Green. Even though Mo Green is a great character, you only get a little piece of him or a little touch of him. But what you get, you remember, because he snaps on Michael. And who snaps on Michael? Well, we see what happens to them when they snap on Michael. Anyways, Alex Rocco's in this. Another great actor, Joe Santos. Joe Santos has been in tons of crime stuff, whether he's playing a cop or a criminal throughout the years. Another great actor, another cool performer from the 70s who was also in Sopranos. He played Angelo Gareppe, who was Tony B's, Steve Buscemi's friend and mentor in the mob, and they were like prison buddies as well. And Angelo Gareppe gets killed by Phil Leotardo there, kind of in a cool way, at his car. Gets shot in the trunk kind of thing. So that's The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Okay, next up we got The Outfit from 1973. Earl Macklin robs a bank owned by the mob, serves his prison time, and is released, only to start a private war against the crime outfit that owned the bank. So this is a Robert Duvall Chicago crime movie, Chicago mob movie. And it's one of those 1970s movies with a dark ending for the main character. And a lot of movies did that in the 70s just to kind of say, Tarantino mentions it in Rogan's podcast recently, just to kind of say, yeah, life sucks. What are you going to do? It's got some great car chases, some good gunfights. It's got Karen Black in it, who's one of my favorite actors from the 70s. And it's Chicago used to call themselves the Outfit, or used to call themselves the Syndicate, or that's at least what other people would call them when referring to them. And Tarantino is a lifelong fan of this movie, having selected it for the first ever Tarantino Film Festival in Austin, Texas. And it's one of the first top billing roles for Robert Duvall. So not just a supporting actor, he was the star in this movie, which is kind of funny to think, because when you think of Robert Duvall, he was such a powerful and popular actor, but I guess he was never really the lead very often. Godfather, he was a supporting character. Apocalypse Now, he was a supporting character. So although he's great, we haven't seen him as the lead too often. It said after this he might have did one more that he was the lead of at the time. I'm sure later on he did other stuff. Obviously because Tender Mercies came out in the 80s and blah, 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 and he was still making movies up till the 2000s. So he did stuff later on, but at this time he was still very quality supporting actor, and that's The Outfit. Next up, we got another low-level crime drama. It takes place in New York City this time. It's The Pope of Greenwich Village. That's 1984. And that's two cousins unknowingly rob the mob and face the dangerous consequences. What actually offshoots me to one thing, check out Rob the Mob. It's kind of a fun movie. I wouldn't necessarily have put Andy Garcia in the boss role. I don't really think he necessarily fits that role. He's a good actor, so he doesn't ruin it, but I think they could have picked someone better. But Rob the Mob is kind of actually a fun, cool movie that was based on a true story. And it's available, I know, and I don't mention it in here. I'm just thinking of it now. So check that out. It's kind of fun. It's better than you think it would be, or is at least better than I thought it would be, and I'm a pretty tough damn critic. So back to The Pope of Greenwich Village. Two cousins rob the mob and face dangerous consequences. They're working in like an Italian restaurant, or at least Eric Roberts is. Then you got Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke is pretty much great, dynamite in every role, especially a very small role in Body Heat. Check him out in that. But you got Eric Roberts and Mickey Rourke. They're both kind of two low-level mobsters who want more. Eric Roberts is definitely more of a loser than Mickey Rourke, but they're both kind of wannabes. But Mickey Rourke is kind of looking out for Eric Roberts more than anything. And I took a lot of inspiration from this movie, amongst other movies, for my short film Sinkers that can be found here. Yeah, and so Mickey Rourke always gives a great performance, and it's cool to see a more authentic side of New York. I love seeing that old school. This was filmed in 1984. Love seeing New York kind of in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that before it was all kind of glamorized. And the biggest surprise to me is Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai, 1999. An African-American mafia hitman who models himself after the samurai of old finds himself targeted for death by the mob. And this is easily one of the best mob movies I've ever seen. And oddly enough, I only saw it for the first time recently, which is 21 years after its release. It feels very authentic. Like I just mentioned before, in The Pope of Greenwich Village, you're seeing New York City during the 90s. And it's another great 1999 movie of all things, but it's one that definitely flies under the radar. But I always remember seeing it at Blockbuster, seeing the cover on the shelves, and never really knowing what it's about. I would never have guessed that it was a mafia movie. Forrest Whitaker doesn't talk until like 20-25 minutes into the movie. So from that, you can tell it's going to be very visual or very strong performance, because most of acting is done when you're not speaking and people are trying to read your face and what you're giving off. And it's also got a great musical score and soundtrack, which we kind of mentioned earlier, another movie, A Few Words, Road to Perdition. You know, they kind of fall... Hey, when you got the best actors in the world working with you, let them do their thing, pack it with good music and visuals, and you got yourself a movie. And so it's directed by art house director Jim Jarmusch, and this could possibly be his most commercial film, because he does a lot of art house, like different style stuff that you kind of have to be into his whole New York artsy scene. And RZA does the soundtrack, so it's a ton of Wu-Tang and music like that for the soundtrack. It flies by, such an entertaining film. The dialogue from the mafia characters is just straight up hilarious and so authentic feeling and real. So very, very good stuff. So that's Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai. It took me 21 years to see it, but it's definitely in my top mob movies ever, and it should be in yours too. Okay, so that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed extraordinary mob movies, and as always, keep on the grass.